No one teaches you this. No teacher, no mentor, no stage guru with a microphone in their ear. But there's a kind of presence that doesn't just command attention. It unsettles. It silences rooms. It makes even the most confident change their minds and look away. It's the kind of magnetism that doesn't shout, it silences. That doesn't need to be visible because the world is already watching. This kind of presence isn't friendly, approachable, or smiling. In fact, it's uncomfortable, it's cold, it's enigmatic, and that's why it's so compelling. There's a psychological trait present in brutal leaders, historical icons, and even the most lethal serial killers. The ability to command other people's emotions without saying a single word. People who walk into a room and, almost invisibly, alter the heartbeat of those present. We're not talking about beauty, nor political power. We're talking about something deeper, an almost clinical mastery over the effect you have. And the most disturbing thing? It can be learned. While most struggle to be accepted, noticed, or loved, some operate at a level where others' desires revolve around them, like planets around the sun. They don't demand attention, they create scarcity. They don't sell charisma, they sell tension. Attraction, in the end, is much less about what you offer, and much more about what you withhold. And when you master this logic, this psychological architecture behind fascination, you become almost psychopathically attractive. And yes, I use that word intentionally, because if you really look, many of the attributes that generate deep fascination are the same ones associated with psychopathic traits. Calculated coldness, extreme emotional control, absence of social fear, unflappable presence, absence of need for validation. This doesn't mean you have to be a psychopath, but it does mean that understanding what these figures evoke emotionally in people and learning to simulate part of that structure gives you an almost unfair advantage. As Machiavelli would say, men in general judge more by their eyes than by their hands. Seduction begins with perception, and perception can be shaped. There's nothing more socially dangerous than someone who understands this. Because the moment you control how you're interpreted, you control the narrative, and whoever controls the narrative controls the game. And for those who think this is exaggerated, stop and look at pop culture's most memorable icons. Patrick Bateman, Don Draper, Tommy Shelby, Vito Corleone. All cold, all silent, all masters of subtext, all irresistible. Why? Because each of them understood that fascination is born from tension, not exposure. From silence, not verbiage. From scarcity, not surrender. Most men have learned to behave like an employee trying to please the boss. Polite, smiling, present, helpful. With sweet speech that sounds like something out of a margarine commercial. Hi, how are you? Wow, you look beautiful today. If you need anything, just call me. The intention seems noble, but the reality, this doesn't generate attraction. It generates security. It generates predictability. It generates a presence so inoffensive it borders on the invisible. It's the emotional equivalent of wallpaper. It's there, but no one notices it. It's there, but no one wants it. There's a silent psychological phenomenon that eats away at you while you believe you're being a good person. The association between excessive kindness and a lack of power. As beautiful as the social discourse that kindness begets kindness may be, the human subconscious doesn't play that game. At deep levels, we are programmed to respond to signals of power, scarcity, and unpredictability. And the nice guy, contrary to what he believes, emits the opposite. Total availability, emotional predictability, and a lack of hierarchy. He doesn't provoke tension, he doesn't command respect, he's pleasant. And pleasantness is rarely irresistible. The French philosopher Pascal Bruckner wrote that modern love died of an excess of good intentions. And perhaps the same thing happened with desire. In trying to be the nice guy, many men have become emotionally castrated. They've censored their intentions, dampened their impulses, layered mask upon mask until no trace of wild truth remains. And what's left is a persona that's too nice, too controlled, too harmless. The kind a woman takes to coffee, but never to bed. The kind she uses as an advisor, but never as a fantasy. And make no mistake, the root of this is fear. Fear of not being accepted, of being judged, of appearing aggressive or inadequate. So they choose the middle path. The path of social safety. The path of constant praise, of the automatic yes, of the untimely laugh. But fear has a scent. And the scent of fear repels. The need for approval that emanates from these behaviors creates an energetic field of silent repulsion. Because paradoxically, the more you try to be chosen, the less desirable you become. It's what psychologist Mark Manson called the law of reversed effort. The more you try to appear attractive, the less attractive you appear. Look at the men who evoke immediate attraction. They don't ask. They don't flatter. They don't explain who they are. They don't beg for time, for attention, for a chance. They simply are. And in this being, there is a weight, a silence, a confidence that needs no argument. Nietzsche said that convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies. And perhaps the most dangerous conviction a man can have is that his kindness will be enough to arouse desire. It won't, because desire needs tension, it needs contrast, it needs risk. And the nice guy is the antithesis of this. This is why controversial figures with questionable morals and challenging behaviors often arouse more desire than the man who does everything right. Cleopatra wasn't seduced by submissive soldiers, but by ruthless emperors. Marilyn Monroe desired not those who idolized her, but those who challenged her. And this pattern has been repeated for centuries because it's rooted in something deeper than personal taste. It's linked to what we call the dominant emotional stimulus. People who provoke fear, excitement, curiosity, and insecurity all at once activate a chemical discharge that generates obsession. And here's the problem with the nice guy. He doesn't activate anything. He's a social anesthetic. He talks like everyone else, acts like everyone else, compliments like everyone else. He's a clone, a generic affection algorithm, and so he's emotionally discarded without even being remembered. You may even be present in someone's life. You may even hear confidences, give advice, do favors. But if you don't stir up a burning sensation, if you don't trigger ambivalence, if you don't ignite emotional sparks, you're not desired. You're merely functional. And nothing functional is seductive. There's a passage in Neil Strauss's The Game where he observes that the most effective pickup artists didn't try to be nice. They teased. They created tension. They were ambiguous, mysterious, challenging. They weren't concerned with being approved, they were focused on being remembered. And that changes everything. Because while the nice guy builds a comfortable emotional bridge, the seducer builds an emotional force field. He creates distance. He evokes doubt. He plants questions that are never answered. And in this emotional vacuum, fascination is born. You need to understand that desire isn't born of certainty. It's born of enigma. And the person who offers everything, attention, affection, approval, availability, kills the enigma before it can blossom. Desire needs space to move, shadows to hide, silence to echo. And this requires you to break the compulsion to be understood all the time. That you learn not to explain yourself, not to justify every gesture, to let people wonder who you are, what you want, why you disappeared, why you came back. This isn't manipulation, this is art. The art of making others lose themselves within you, not because of your kindness, but because of your complexity, because of your emotional density, because of your mystery, because of your presence that doesn't need to beg for space, because it naturally occupies space. And this presence is only built when you abandon the role of pleaser and assume the role of architect of your own energy. When you choose to be real, even if uncomfortable, intense, even if polarizing, authentic, even if it costs superficial praise. The brutal truth is, you will never be remembered for being kind. You will be remembered for provoking something. And most men die socially before 30 because they never learn to provoke, only to adapt, to mold, to soften, pruning yourself. And in this desperate attempt to be accepted, they become imperceptible. You're not here to be loved by everyone. You're here to be impossible to ignore. And that begins when you abandon the addiction to validation and begin cultivating tension. Tension is the invisible thread of attraction. And those who know how to manipulate this thread don't need beauty, money, or status. They only need the courage to endure discomfort. Because all seduction is born of a conflict between what a person feels and what they understand, between what they want and what you reveal. And if you don't know how to navigate this conflict, you'll be just another friendly face in a sea of emotional mediocrity. Seduction begins when you stop trying to please and start becoming unforgettable. It's easy to get lost in the idea that those who dominate social media are those who talk the most, who move the most, who assert themselves with expansive words and gestures. But there is a kind of power that dismantles this illusion, the power of silence. A presence that doesn't shout, doesn't convince, doesn't argue. It simply exists with such density that everything around it must bow. People like this don't enter rooms, they emotionally invade the field. They don't smile out of politeness, nor greet out of insecurity. They observe. And only later, when they decide, do they act. This isn't arrogance. It's dominance. A cold, intense, almost clinical dominance, and that's what creates real magnetism. Silent presence is a hidden code of the social game. Most people never realize it, but they feel it. Because when someone who carries this frequency is nearby, something shifts in the atmosphere. The volume of conversation drops slightly. Laughter becomes more tense. Time slows down. Attention escapes words and begins to gravitate toward the energy of the one who doesn't speak. And why does this happen? Because well-sustained silence is the greatest creator of expectation there is. It carries an emotional charge that words can never reach. And those who know how to manipulate this charge don't need beauty or fame. They only need control. It is control that separates the ordinary from the magnetic, and control begins within. A disorganized mind produces a restless body. An anxious mind overflows with microgestures, unnecessary touches, and forced smiles. But a mind that dominates itself dominates others. This is the essence of cold magnetism, appearing unattainable because you are completely within yourself. You don't act on impulse. You don't try to fill the silence. You sustain it. And the more you sustain it, the more value it gains. Psychologically, this is based on the scarcity of stimulation. The human brain values what is rare. And in the hyper-communicative world we live in, silence has become scandalously rare. Everyone talks too much. Everyone shares too much. Everyone exposes themselves too much. And that's precisely why someone who knows how to be selective with their words, movements, and reactions immediately stands out. They become a vivid contrast, an enigma in a world of noise. And the enigma attracts, because mystery has always been a more powerful trigger for attention than any argument. Imagine a room full of people talking. In the corner, someone observes silently. His posture is erect, his gaze precise, his breathing controlled. He doesn't force a smile, he doesn't seek contact, he's simply there. The collective mind begins to fire questions. Who is he? Why is he so calm? Why isn't anyone distracting him? And, without realizing it, the group is already seduced, because a lack of reactivity is mistaken for superiority. And human beings are programmed to admire what appears unshakable. The more you resist the urge to react to the environment, the more the environment begins to react to you. It's what social psychologists call the halo effect. The mind attributes positive qualities to someone based on a single impressive characteristic. In the case of silent presence, that characteristic is self-control. People who demonstrate extreme self-control are perceived as more intelligent, more trustworthy, more powerful, even if they haven't said a word. This was proven in a classic 1980 study, where evaluation groups rated silent leaders as more competent and charismatic than talkative leaders, even when the talkative ones had more experience. Silence, when used well, projects authority. And it's not just science that says this. History confirms it. Look at great leaders, generals, strategists. Lincoln was known for staying silent for long minutes before answering a difficult question. Churchill was a master of dramatic pauses. Napoleon said, "Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake." And the great seducers of literature, from Mr. Darcy to Heathcliff, were never verbose, they were presence. Weight, gaze, mystery. And it all starts with the body. Body language is the silent vehicle of your energy. And most people's mistakes lie in postural anxiety, restless hands, tense shoulders, unsteady feet. All of this screams insecurity. Cold magnetism, on the other hand, demands an emotional aesthetic. Erect posture, slow movements, minimal gestures, steady eyes. The key is restraint. Those who move little seem more confident. Those who speak less seem more strategic. Those who take their time before responding seem more important. It's all about perception, and perception is the only game in town. In the animal world, the predator doesn't flinch. It observes, it calculates, it moves at the precise moment. And the human brain, inherited from millennia of survival instinct, responds to this pattern with reverence. That's why the metaphor of the predator's gaze is so effective. It's not about threatening, but about holding the gaze with such emotional control that the other begins to doubt their own safety. That's when you become hypnotic, because now you're no longer just present, you're inside the other person's mind. And whoever enters the mind commands. This kind of command isn't achieved with force, it's achieved with presence. Presence is your ability to occupy the now with emotional density. It's not about being everywhere, it's about being so fully in one place that it revolves around you. People who have presence don't fight for attention, they receive it, not because they ask for it, but because they become impossible to ignore. And this impossibility comes from contained energy, not from spilled energy. This brings us to a delicate point: contained vulnerability. Cold magnetism isn't emotional coldness in the literal sense. It's not the absence of feeling. It's the conscious decision not to expose everything, to keep layers hidden, to reveal only what is necessary. Think of figures like Don Draper from Mad Men. He wasn't seductive because he told his story. He was seductive because he hid, because there was always something unsaid, unrevealed, unresolved. And this creates tension. And where there is tension, there is fascination. In a society where everyone wants to be understood, being incomprehensible becomes irresistible. And the paradox is, the less you seek to be understood, the more people try to understand you. And in this effort, they become involved, surrendered, and lost. This is how deep attraction happens, when the other person feels emotionally challenged by you. When you are a mystery they want to decipher, but never can. And this silent game is infinitely more powerful than any catchphrase. It's important to emphasize, magnetism isn't about being distant. It's about knowing how to calibrate your presence, being close but not too close, looking someone in the eye but not smiling constantly, speaking little but with words charged with intention. It's a game of constant control, and this control isn't for the weak. It's for those who can bear the weight of being observed, judged, misinterpreted, without needing to defend themselves. Because the truth is, power lies in those who can endure discomfort. And speaking of discomfort, it is the greatest barometer of your progress. If you start to feel uncomfortable talking less, observing more, holding your gaze instead of looking away, congratulations, you're leaving the zone of emotional mediocrity. Because what makes you one of a kind is exactly what makes you feel safe. And nothing great comes from comfort. Magnetism is tension, and tension is well-managed discomfort. If you want to be remembered, you need to be felt. And to be felt, you need to create contrast. And the greatest contrast in a world of noise is silence. It's at this point that you begin to break out of the statistics. Because now you understand that power isn't in conquering with words, but in disturbing with presence. That the game isn't about being understood, but about being interpreted. That seduction isn't in what you say, but in what you keep silent. And that authority isn't in saying what you think, but in making the other person think without you saying anything. And when that happens, you no longer need to introduce yourself. The room has already felt it. The eyes have already sought you. The atmosphere has already changed. You're no longer just a body there. You became a living question, an elegant doubt, an absence in the form of presence. And in that moment, you became the center. Silently, relentlessly, inevitably. Some people talk too much, others just enough. But there's a third type, the one who says little, insinuates everything, and controls others' perceptions without even opening their mouth. This type doesn't rely on logic or persuasion. They rely on a more subtle, deeper, more lethal game, the game of subtext. The field where ambiguity becomes a weapon, suggestion becomes a spell, and silence breeds emotional confusion. And in this game, the most dangerous never raise their voices. They simply sow doubts, then watch others drown trying to interpret them. The human mind hates gaps. When something isn't explained, it tries to fill it with meaning. When a facial expression is ambiguous, the brain speculates. When a sentence has a double meaning, it interprets. And the more room there is for the imagination, the more powerful the influence you wield. This is what great seducers understand. They don't need to assert anything. They simply leave clues. They create atmospheres, they sow possibilities, and the more the other person tries to understand, the more emotionally involved they become. This is the secret behind magnetic ambiguity. being someone who can't be deciphered with a superficial reading. Someone who has layers, who changes pace, who seems one type then another, who is sometimes distant, sometimes engaging, who oscillates between warmth and iciness so naturally that it disarms any attempt at categorization. And when you can't be defined, you can't be dismissed, because the mind only dismisses what it understands, and you can't be dismissed if you're still a mystery. But be careful. This isn't empty manipulation. It's not being cold for the sake of it. It's about understanding that fascination isn't born from total transparency. It's born from contrast, from doubt, from "is he interested?" mixed with "did I go too far?" And to do that, you need to learn to disappear at the right time. Because one of the greatest triggers of perception is disappearance. Not the forced theatrical kind, but the strategic kind. The "he was here and now he's gone" thing. When you withdraw from an interaction at the peak of connection, not because you were ignored, but because you chose to, you leave an emotional trail that lasts for days. The other person wonders, did I do something wrong? Did he lose interest? Will he come back? And in the process, you occupy a larger emotional space than when you were present. It's counterintuitive, but it's true. In many cases, your absence says more than any statement. This technique was used masterfully by Casanova. He created intense involvement, but never completely surrendered. There was always something keeping him one step ahead, an invisible wall between him and his victims. And this wall was what generated desire. Because desire is at its core an impulse to get closer. And if you're always available, there's nowhere to get closer. You've killed the tension, you've killed the desire. Now think about the figures who left the biggest emotional mark on you. Were they the predictable ones? The ones who responded quickly? The ones who were 100% clear about everything the whole time? Probably not. They were the ones who confused you, the ones who seemed inaccessible for a moment, the ones who created noise, the ones who made you think, rethink, imagine. They were the ones who left a space, and you had to fill it with your imagination. And that imagination became attachment. This is what you need to master: the art of not giving everything away, of leaving empty spaces, of using phrases with multiple meanings, of reacting with an enigmatic smile instead of a direct answer, of giving looks that can be interpreted in more than one way. You don't need to lie. You need to leave room for interpretation. And that room is where the invisible game takes place. But there's a crucial detail. You can only play this game if you have emotional control. Because the impulse of most people is to want to explain themselves, to justify themselves, to ensure they've been understood, to ask for validation. This kills the effect. The master of perception doesn't seek understanding. They accept misunderstanding. They understand that the other person's discomfort is part of the game. That confusion is a gateway to fascination. That not being understood is more powerful than being approved. And if you think this is an exaggeration, look at the great masters of war and diplomacy. Sun Tzu said, "All war is based on deception." Machiavelli taught that appearances, more than reality, govern the world. These men weren't talking about romantic seduction. They were talking about domination, about controlling the actions of others without forcing them, simply by guiding their perception. And perception is a sensitive puppet in the hands of those who know how to calibrate it. So how can you start applying this today? First, break the habit of constantly explaining yourself. Let people draw their own conclusions. Second, observe more than you speak. In any interaction, listen more than you share. Third, be intentionally ambiguous. Say things that can have more than one meaning. Use subtle humor, light irony, dramatic pauses. This isn't being mysterious. This is creating an emotional narrative with you as the main character. Because that's exactly what you become when you master the invisible game. A living narrative, an open story, a question that moves forward. And people get addicted to unresolved stories, to open plots, to endings that haven't yet arrived. That's what makes you unforgettable. Not the number of words spoken, but the impact of the doubt you sow. And if you go beyond that, if you can combine this ambiguity with the cold magnetism we explored earlier, then you transform. You stop being an ordinary human being and become a field of energy, a mirror for the desires, fears, and insecurities of others. And whoever becomes a mirror gains control. because everything the other projects onto you turns back on them. And you don't even have to lift your hand. In the end, the invisible game isn't about seduction. It's about making the other person seduce you. It's about creating an illusion so subtle, so captivating, so rooted in what's unsaid, that the other person doesn't even realize they're being pulled. And when they do, they've gone too far. They're already emotionally invested. They're already hooked on the enigma. And now, only you have the answer. But be careful. This power requires ethics. Because with great social skills comes a brutal responsibility. You can choose to use it to conquer cleanly or to manipulate dirtily. But know that the game responds, and those who sow chaos reap chaos. So master this power, but never forget that it is power. An invisible power, but real. But this is still the beginning, because what was revealed here today is just the surface of something much deeper. There is a manual, a forbidden archive, a compendium of psychological techniques, behavioral strategies, and emotional triggers that have been deliberately hidden from most because they give too much power. A manual that breaks social filters, ignores the rules of political correctness, and delivers without censorship how to activate desire almost instantly. And the craziest thing? It works in seconds. The name is straightforward. The Forbidden Manual. How to Trigger Desire in 60 Seconds. It's not a PDF. It's not a video floating around the internet. It's an audiobook strategically narrated to install the concepts so your brain assimilates and applies them automatically. Each chapter is designed to reconfigure the way you look, act, control conversations, manipulate attention, and trigger triggers that people can't resist. It doesn't matter if you're shy, ordinary, or have tried everything. The manual ignores all of that because it doesn't start with appearances. It starts with the invisible psychodynamics, with the effect of reaction, of perception. And here's the most shocking detail. You don't need to change who you are. You just need to understand how the game works. And the manual delivers this in minute detail. The right words, the strategic silences, the calibration of tension, the engineering behind the look that provokes, the touch that leaves a mark, the line that sticks in the other person's mind for days. And you can access it now. So if you felt the impact of this video, if something inside you realized this is the turning point you needed, don't waste time. Click the I want this button now and immerse yourself in the content that is rewriting the way thousands of men around the world are activating desire, dominance, and respect in any environment. This audiobook was created to be listened to on the go, in the car, at the gym, on the street. Every minute of it carries high-impact tactical instructions that imprint on your body language and automatically shape your behavior. But a warning, this is not for amateurs. It's not entertainment. It's behavioral reprogramming. It's applied psychology focused on real results. And if you're not ready to be seen in a completely different way, almost hypnotic, maybe this isn't the time. But if you are, then click now. Because the price of social ignorance is too high. And the time you waste being ignored, pushed into someone else's comfort zone, or emotionally disarmed is time you never get back. You can keep trying to be cool and hope that one day someone will realize your worth. Or you can take control, create your own social legend, make yourself impossible to ignore. It's just a click away, and it starts with the Forbidden Manual, How to Trigger Desire in 60 Seconds. Click now. Transform your name into presence, your presence into tension, and your tension into absolute dominance.